While everyone else is out there screaming about how Outriders is the newest, biggest, best thing ever, I just spent over 9 hours in one day alone playing this little game by the name of Evil Genius 2. And just for the record, 2 quick things. Number 1, you wouldn't believe the amount of times I've had to stop myself from accidentally calling this game Evil Within 2, because the name does start with evil, and that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. And number 2, it actually is really rare for me to dedicate that much time, especially in one continued sitting, to one single game. Assuming, of course, I even happen to have that much spare time in the first place, which is not normally the case. Evil Genius 2 is a really interesting game. It definitely has its pros and cons, and trust me, it has plenty of both. And we'll get into all that shortly. But there's something so obviously niche about it definitely stands out from a lot of other similar games on the market. Evil Genius 2, a sequel to the original Evil Genius game, released all the way back in 2004, developed and published by Rebellion, the studio behind games like Sniper Elite and Strange Brigade. Yeah, pretty sure no one's remembered that game, even though it only came out like 2 years ago. Evil Genius 2 is a real-time strategy game with a strong dual focus on both base building and unit management. You play as a supervillain building out your own personal hideout, and slowly establishing your own sprawling international criminal empire as you pursue your endgame goal of total world domination. One of the first things you'll notice is that this game has this really adorable animation style I just have to love. It's so cartoony and clearly draws influence from old 50s and 60s movies, TV shows, and radio serials, with generic G-men from the government fighting the forces of evil in all their absurdly melodramatically evil glory. Humor is a very big factor in this game. It's not quite as in-your-face as, say, the Dungeons games would be. There's no omnipresent narrator constantly chattering away in your ear, which is a nice relief. Unless I'm playing the Stanley Parable specifically, I'd rather go without the 24/7 omnipresent, omniscient commentary. Instead, Evil Genius 2 focuses on giving your evil mastermind character their own unique identity, and the humor mostly resides in how your boss character interacts with the rest of the world, both within his or her own institution, and to a lesser degree the outside world. For nearly the entire game, your evil genius will reside exclusively within their own base of operations, supervising their minions and devising new dastardly plans for the conquest of the world. Not exactly much outdoor time for them, but I suppose that's something many of us can relate to in the current climate. As for what kind of evil genius you want to be, the game gives you a few basic options, all based on your typical supervillain tropes. You can have that short bald guy who looks like Dr. Evil from Austin Powers, albeit if his sole diet consisted of just McDonald's 24 hours a day. You have an angry bearded Russian man blasting his enemies away with his poorly aimed rocket launcher. You have the administrator from TF2 looking younger and sexier than normal, and you have a technologically minded scientific researcher dispatching her enemies with the unbridled power of autism. If you haven't picked it up by now, I'm being a little bit facetious because these characters are excessively exaggerated and I have to glory in their absurdity. As for me, I went for the gold-obsessed Dr. Evil lookalike because his simple, soul obsessive desire for gold and to a lesser degree world domination appeal to me. I've seen so many films, read so many books featuring incredibly convoluted or multifaceted villains that it's honestly just refreshing to assume the role of a villain that basically just wants to get rich and take over the world with the aid of his stupid henchmen and henchwomen. To some extent, I feel that would be me as a villain. I'm not going to go about world domination just to make the world a better place, or to illustrate some anarchist philosophy about how it only takes one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. Nothing like that. I would just go about taking over the world because I'm bored. I don't care if that means I'm chaotic evil on the D&D scale, that's just how I am. Boredom would elevate me to world domination, not actual inspiration to do good. Joking aside, there are some minor gameplay differences between the various mastermind options, but for the most part, it's all cosmetic in nature. The only really notable thing that separates them all is their specialty. My bold, cackling hobbit man over here is quite good at building up money. Other bosses are good at scientific research or resolving violent conflicts within the base. All of them have their own unique way of handling things, so there's no clear best boss to play as. They're all fairly equal, at least until you start stepping up and taking out the competition to prove definitively to the world who's really in charge of the criminal underworld. I never played the original Evil Genius game way back in 2004, since at that time I was far more of a console gamer than I was a PC gamer, so I'm very much a newcomer to this bizarre, colorful, and satirical world. However, luckily the developers seem to be anticipating just that eventuality, because the game has a really helpful and extensive tutorial. Even at the start, with very few building options and commands available to you, the UI of Evil Genius 2 can easily confuse newcomers. However, you do eventually learn to navigate the menus and maximize the effectiveness of your personnel and equipment. Similar to most strategy games, the UI is easy to learn but difficult to master. You can be 6 hours in and still learning or relearning stuff that you previously forgot, as sometimes it's been so long since you've had to do a certain thing that the knowledge of how to do that thing in future has been all but forgotten. I've mentioned it in passing earlier, but base building really is at the heart and center of the game. The size that you can make this base is ridiculous. I'm over 12 hours in now, and I've just now started maximizing the amount of room I have on the ground floor alone. And there's still multiple floors I have yet to tap into. In my main base, there's like around 5 floors. You got a basement and a ground floor, and then 4 floors above the ground floor. So depending on whether you're in the US, where that would be considered 5 floors in a basement, or Europe, where it would be considered 4 floors, a ground floor, and a basement, we can all agree that there is a hell of a lot of room to work with. Now, my recommendation is that you only use what space you absolutely need, and focus on making the most out of each level of usable space, as opposed to trying to spread yourself out too thin early on. While having all of my sensitive areas on the ground floor where it's within easy range of enemy attacks isn't ideal, along with the fact that the condensed amount of floor space makes it very easy for the forces of justice to sneak past my defenses, even still somewhat after I've redoubled the emphasis on security on my ground floor. It's better than overextending myself before my organization is fully ready for the expansion at its own pace. My long-term goal is to further drastically increase the security attaché, to further drastically increase the security force, and expand the amount of lockers and beds for my minions, in order to increase the maximum capacity for recruitment. I originally built my ground floor simply in order of whatever I needed to complete the tutorial, and began working out from there over time. Ideally, you'd want to be a bit more organized with your available space than I've been for the majority of my time. Who knows whether I'll really be able to complete my plan before this video is fully edited, but that's simply my goal. Where I can be more efficient, I'm trying to be. Now, simply building rooms and corridors is merely the beginning. In order to really get anything done or produced, you're going to need a power source to generate the power utilized by the massive amount of machinery you're going to have at your disposal. Everything from doors, cameras, anti-intruder traps, prison cells, and the accompanying interrogation chair, etc. all need power in order to function. Fall below the necessary power levels even for a moment, and you'll lose all light and power in your base, save for some emergency red lights. The game makes it pretty easy to maintain power. I've had far more difficulty maintaining power in Fallout Shelter, the Fallout 4 mobile game, than I did here. Unless you're absolutely dreadful at resource management, you're not going to really encounter difficulty beyond your capability to manage. Once you get to around the halfway point, you'll unlock power generators that will buy you a little bit of time if the power system falters. But even then, it's only a temporary deterrent, not a permanent one. If you don't want the game to frequently come to a crashing halt, you need to closely watch the power level, represented by a numerical value at the bottom of your screen. So I mentioned security a minute ago. Let's get more into that. The more you grow and the more you venture out into the world on missions, the more attention you'll attract to the superhero and government covert ops groups that represent the good guys in this universe. And you really don't want to attract a lot of heat all the time. These superheroes are more akin to the boys than they are the Justice League. They will kill your guys and destroy rooms in your base and make off with valuable intel to make future raids far more efficient. There's a certain superhero that looks like a noir detective that likes to leave a bunch of fake evidence on the ground to convict me later. And he's really funny because I'll send my guys to go beat the shit out of him and his guys, and he'll die within like 5 seconds. But he won't technically die. He'll just disappear into a cloud of smoke, and he'll do the typical Team Rocket, "I'll be back again" thing. After the 50th time he fails, I mean, you just gotta feel bad for the poor guy. Aside from him, though, most of the superheroes are really annoying, but not that difficult to handle unless they're bringing in some heavy firepower in terms of numbers. I think the largest number of minions I ever lost in a raid was around 20 men, aka about a quarter of my workforce at the time. And even then, those losses were only significant because 3 factions attacked my base at the same time. Ironically, with each side being completely unaware the others were attacking as well. They just all had amazingly good timing, and I had amazingly bad timing. I had a number of superheroes, including one boss character, attacking one of my corridors. While one corridor down, a group of spies was intent on taking pictures of my base, and an enemy supervillain, who I was waging a successful war against, had sent in a number of robots to, shall we say, voluntarily self-destruct in order to cause maximum amount of casualties and property damage in my base. I was able to destroy some of the robots before they could all go Al Akbar, but more than half of them got the job done anyway. They destroyed a couple rooms, killed a couple of my guys, and set fire to a little less than half of my floor. All in all, it wasn't a great look, but all the fires got put out at the end of the day, so likewise I killed most, if not all of the spies, and I eliminated all the superheroes save for one or two that I saved for interrogation, so I could have a bit of fun with them Ramsay Bolton style. The interrogation process was one of the few mechanics I was actually really disappointed with. I know it sounds pretty creepy to admit it, but it was really fun torturing people in the game. The animations are great, but functionally as a gameplay mechanic, it's completely pointless. Unless the enemy NPC being interrogated is the object of some main objective mission, which does happen, the interrogation mechanic is otherwise completely pointless. There is almost no reason whatsoever to interrogate any of your captured prisoners, nor any reason to capture them in the first place for the intent of interrogation. I say almost no reason because technically there is a mild reason, in that they will sometimes reveal an extra opportunity that will make you a bit more money. But by the time you're even 8 or 10 hours into the game, unless you're really bad at managing your gold, you're probably going to be constantly hitting the max limit anyway, making this aspect of interrogation needlessly redundant. Given the pointlessness of doing so, I've all but given up on interrogating people and instead just order my minions to eliminate any enemies or spies on sight. It would have been better if this mechanic was fleshed out a little bit more, such as maybe captured spies have a 25% chance to provide information that will allow your minions to more easily recognize the next batch of spies on site and deal with them without needing your involvement. Or maybe you use the spies as hostage bait to lure out superheroes so you can capture them and interrogate said superheroes for information to help you further advance your world domination goals. Basically a natural system of escalation built upon statistics and a certain degree of risk tolerance. You could flesh it out more than that, but I'm just pitching this as an informal example of what a more thorough system could look like, and how that could result in a more diverse and thus more interesting gameplay formula. Another mechanic I was and still am very divided on is the implementation of the scientific research tree. If you've ever played any of the turn-based strategy games from Firaxis Games, such as the XCOM games or the Sid Meier's Civilization franchise, you're familiar with how scientific trees are implemented. Basically, as your world, your base, whatever it may be, proceeds to grow, you can slowly embark on a series of scientific advancements represented as icons on a map. Many of these icons are connected either in a linear fashion or in conjunction with other branches. Completing research of new scientific advancements usually results in some new benefit for your base. This can range from new defenses that usually help expose and potentially subdue or eliminate enemy intruders, to new types of rooms you can create in your base, to other more general operational improvements. One important one I got midway through the game allowed me to drill through extremely tough rock to create more space that I beforehand was unable to tap into. This may sound like a very minor upgrade or side grade, but I promise you, when you're delicately trying to manage your workspace to be as efficient as possible, which is hard to do on your first floor, where everything is very random by design, every little bit of efficiency I can find is more than welcome. Early into the game, I was really looking forward to opening up satellite locations across the world, slowly spreading my influence and corrupting the world country by country to my particular brand of evilness. And satellite locations do offer you some worthwhile benefits. They open up opportunities to make money and to keep the authorities off your scent. It's a constant balance between the two, as you can only undertake one single operation per country at a time. You can engage in multiple operations across multiple countries. You can simply not do more than one in one particular region. If the notoriety bar completely fills up, the country or region goes into complete shutdown, and all your current schemes are utterly cancelled. So it's always good to be mindful of what your status is in all the countries you're currently active in. You're constantly forced to choose between the desire to make money and the desire to avoid an unnecessary amount of attention. It's unwise to constantly be playing a high-stakes game of chicken with the law, as ceaseless raids will have a direct negative consequence on your bottom line and your productivity levels. However, until you really unlock the vast majority of the world, which can only be done by expanding upon the number of satellite equipment in your base, you'll end up spending most of your time just staring at the world map, not really engaging, just spending minutes at a time just waiting for a handful of active timed quests to complete. It's not exactly engaging, to be honest, and it's a shame because, again, this is a very interesting concept that would have greatly benefited from more detailed elaboration. You could have gone one of two different directions. Option 1, you could have emulated other games like 2 Point Hospital and allowed your criminal mastermind to maintain control over multiple layers across the world. You could have satellite layers be slightly smaller and more goal-oriented than the main one. For example, you could create a distribution center for misinformation and propaganda to distract your enemies and cause them to lose focus on you for a span of time and instead focus on one of your competitors. Or maybe you create a non-operating private foundation, a charitable organization your mastermind uses to distribute money from your criminal enterprises to fund various reputable and internationally recognized nonprofit benefit charities. Charities that in turn provide you with some much needed goodwill and political power, making it easier for you to expand your influence, while also indirectly swaying public opinion in your favor, giving you effectively a shield by the sheer nature of your publicity. This is very common in superhero comics when you have a rich villain like Lex Luthor or the Kingpin, but that's only one option. Option 2. You incorporate a bunker mechanic into the game, where if the forces of justice are constantly spotting you in your evil facility via the spies they send in to infiltrate your base, logically they're going to keep coming at you until they either capture you or eliminate you. So maybe to distance yourself from the heat, your character has to travel between your main facility and these satellite locations on a fairly frequent basis, which on one hand gives you the distance you need, but also to some degree may limit your operations. You could make it so no scientific research can be done without the boss character being on base, and any active scientific progress would have to be restarted from the beginning. You could do other stuff as well. My point is that there are many opportunities for further depth in this game. Depth that this game oftentimes just fails to explore, much to its loss. These hypothetical examples are just that, hypothetical. I used to get comments all the time along the lines of, "You criticize the game, but you don't offer an alternative solution. What's your idea?" So, those are my ideas. I'm not saying the game is trash because it doesn't follow my particular solutions for adding depth and complexity. As I hope I've illustrated in detail already, I'm not opposed to the game in the first place. I'm simply just criticizing the game because in generalities it does very well, but when it comes to the specifics, it is too strictly adherent to a minimalistic design philosophy that leads to far too much unnecessary downtime. If you want to play passive and focus on the long haul, this kind of game should allow that approach. However, if you want to play hardball and get aggressive, the game should allow for that as well. It feels like the developers were, in this regard, more focused on appealing to the typical pump and dump type Let's Play channels looking to make 1 or 2 single videos off of it, rather than the very dedicated base building RTS community that the game and its PR strategy at least pretended to appeal to. Overall, if you're into the whole base building RTS genre, or even if you just appreciate the absurd, subversive comedy tones, I highly recommend giving this game a go. I get that during the past few minutes it sounds like I'm really trying to rip this game into shreds, but I'm not. I'm just giving 100% the most honest, authentic feedback I can to you all, so you know full well what you may or may not be potentially buying. My opinions are just mine. I only speak for myself. If you feel differently, by all means, I'll look forward to discussing it with you in the comments section below, if you're interested in having that conversation with me there. I'm actually very open to chatting there. It's kind of refreshing, to be honest. I get the feeling I'm one of the few people with a YouTube channel, whether my size or larger, that actually bothers to respond to comments. You can find the game on Steam for the fairly modest price of $39.99 USD, or your regional equivalent. I've had a lot of fun playing this game. I found it so addicting in a fairly relaxed way that not only did I play it for over 9 hours in one day, I still had it in my head when I was asleep, dreaming I was still playing it. And that rarely happens to me. It's definitely not a perfect game. I don't know if anyone can honestly qualify or quantify what a perfect game is supposed to be. Every game has its faults, and Evil Genius 2 definitely has a few limitations that keep it from reaching its fullest potential, but it's still an incredibly engrossing experience that I'll look forward to continuing coming back to in the future. I really hope the game goes the 2 Point Hospital direction and releases a bunch of post-launch DLC expansions with new playable characters, new base location options, and new gameplay mechanics, because this is a world I definitely want to come back to in new and invigorating ways, preferably sooner rather than later. Very few games leave that kind of lasting impression on me. I'm not saying you'll feel the same, I don't know that. But for me, it checked all the boxes for what makes a good game of this kind. Not a perfect game, but a good game. If you can get past all the awkward camera controls, as well as the relative inability to directly control your minions, and some of the other things I've mentioned in this review, there aren't that many cons, aside from those I've already mentioned, compared to the many pros in this game's favor. But that said, that's where I'm going to wrap it up for today. Let me know what you think of Evil Genius 2. Are you interested in establishing your own super evil base on a deserted island, eliminating the competition, and fending off the forces of justice as they continually attempt to put an end to your criminal enterprise? What's your takeaway overall? Let me know in the comments section down below. Also, commentating does really help give this video a bit of a boost in the algorithm, so there's that too, if you want to give this channel a small leg up. If you want to support the work I do in this channel, please do consider subscribing and clicking the bell to get notified when I upload future review videos. I don't currently feature sponsorships on the channel, and nor do I really shill for a Patreon page or something similar. I don't ask people to give me money. All I ask is that if you enjoy this kind of content, at least consider subscribing and clicking the bell, because YouTube does make it really hard for small creators like me to grow. And doing both of those things somewhat forces YouTube's hand and ensures that you get to see my content when it goes live. My current end of year goal is to cross over 2,000 subscribers. subscribers. Earlier this year, I made a public pledge that if this channel crosses over 2,000 subscribers by December 31st, 2021, I will donate $100 to the Team Trees nonprofit initiative, a group dedicated to reducing our carbon footprint and repairing the damage done by environmental disasters by planting millions of new trees every year. It's a great cause, and if you want to help me do a little bit of good and give back to the world, there's never reason to subscribe and help nudge me closer to fulfilling my pledge. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Stay safe and peace out.